Good morning, Bob.
Good morning.
I have a trace that needs to carry 1.5 amps. How wide does it need to be?
That's a good question, a common question. What I usually do when I get that sort of a problem on my board is I open up the good old common Google. I look for copper, current, capacity, calculators. This brings up a list. The one that I personally prefer is their circuitcalculator.com. I click on that and that brings up the PCB trace width calculator. This is a very easy form to fill out. You key in the current, you said 1.5 amp,
Yes.
and the thickness is 1 ounce copper or 1/2 ounce copper or 2 ounce copper.
Let's go with 1 ounce copper this time.
Okay, 1 ounce copper, which is a very common one. Sometimes you may have a 1/2 ounce, sometimes you may do 2 ounce. If you're using 2 ounce, you're probably doing a little more than 1.5 amps. The temperature rise in degrees Celsius, 5 degrees is usually acceptable. The ambient temperature or room temperature of 25 degrees Celsius. You can change that to Fahrenheit if you'd rather and put it about 80 degrees Fahrenheit. And the trace length, maybe 3 inches long, is fine. Now the immediately calculates the trace width for internal and for external. If you notice, the external traces only needs to be 31 mils wide, while internal it needs to be 82 mils wide. This is because there's insulation within the printed circuit board for the internal traces. The external traces are exposed to the air and the heat can radiate out into the air much more easily. That's why you need a wider trace inside than you need outside the board. So you need to set up your design rules for any circuit carrying 1.5 amps to have a minimum trace of 82 mils. Now that doesn't mean that when you go into the pad it has to be 82 mils or 31.5 mils. That means as it's going across the board it needs to be 82, or in this case I would bump it up to 100 mils. And trace width on the external layers, top and bottom, it wants a minimum of 31.5, so I just use a 40 mil trace, maybe even a 50 mil trace to route across the board for that current, and that should be quite adequate. Does that get your question answered?
That's fabulous. That helps a great deal. Thank you.
Okay, if you have any more questions, be sure to contact us, CA Design. Thank you.